Wow, thank you, and thank you for being here. So yes, one of the reporters sent a tweet this morning, and it said, I suppose Amy Klobuchar snowmobiled down. But actually, I drove down with our staff, and we got here at 2 a.m. just to see all of you. Minnesota actually started voting yesterday, so we had a vote rally, but I wanted to be here and see you. And I just knew you'd be here despite the snow because, as we know, to have strong public schools, you must have a strong ISEA. And that is exactly what you are. So I want to thank Mike, I want to thank Mary Jane, all of the great leaders in this room. And I want to thank you for your talent and dedication to the classroom. I also want to thank you for not just doing your work by the day, but also helping so many incredible candidates that are running for office. It is because of your work in that last election that Cindy and Abby went to the Congress and that we turned the House of Representatives back into the people's house. And I always tell people, if you think we can't win in the Midwest, or you think that strong unions and a strong union message can't win, I have 4 words for you. Former Governor Scott Walker. So, some of you know me since I am your senator next door. But you may not know all the details about me and my strong union background. So unions made my family's story possible. Unions are why I'm standing up here today. My grandpa was an iron ore miner, and before that he was a Teamster. And he had to quit school without even graduating from high school because his parents were sick. He was the oldest of 9 kids, and oldest boy, and he had to help raise his brothers and sisters. And he had wanted to be in the Navy, but instead he took that job pulling a wagon and then in the mines. And every day he would go down in this cage with his lunch bucket that my grandma would pack 1,500 feet underground. The mines were really dangerous back then. My dad actually still remembers the caskets in the church because so many miners would die, and the whistle would go off, and people would run, and they wouldn't know who died. Was it their brother? Was it their son? Was it their husband? And guess what happened? Unions happened. And that made those mines safe. And that was what made the lives better in northern Minnesota. So then he saved money in a coffee can in the basement along with my grandma to send my dad to a community college. My dad graduates, he becomes a newspaper man and a member of the Newspaper Guild Union. My mom, and here's the best story of all, she grows up in Milwaukee, she wants to be a teacher. She moves to Minnesota because they had strong teachers' unions. She ends up teaching 2nd grade until she is 70 years old. Now that story is a little more interesting than it sounds because you see my parents got divorced and somehow my parents had put all of her teachers' pension money into adding a porch onto our back house. And so can you imagine what I heard growing up after they got divorced? Well, I've got to teach till I'm 70 years old because we put that money into that back porch. I hope you like sitting out on that back porch, she would say. But she loved teaching. And my favorite story about my mom was actually when she died, the story I heard. She taught that 2nd grade class, and she loved teaching the monarch butterfly unit. And she would dress up as a monarch butterfly with a tunic and antennas and tights when she released the butterfly in front of these adoring 2nd graders with a sign that said, "To Mexico or bust." And she always told me that she went grocery shopping afterward at a store she didn't normally go to. I never knew why until she died. Mother comes up with her son, older son, very disabled, and she says to me, "This is my son." And the mother is just sobbing. I cannot figure out what's going on. The boy's smiling, and she says, "This is my son, and your mom was his 2nd grade teacher," and she was his favorite teacher. And he loved that monarch butterfly unit. And years later, when he graduated from high school, he got a job bagging groceries at this one store. And every year when your mom taught the unit, she would wear that outfit, she would go to his store, she would stand in his line and give him a big hug. That is what schools are about. That is what your work is about, whether you are a teacher, whether you work in the cafeteria, whether you drive a bus. That's what our school system is about. It's about looking out for our kids. So I stand here before you today as a granddaughter of a union member, the daughter of a teacher and a union member, the daughter of a newspaperman and a union member, and a candidate for president of the United States. That is what shared dreams are about. And I would not be here without the power of unions and the power of education. And I will tell you, I am a proud product of the public schools. I went to actually suburban schools, high school, middle school, down to elementary. I remember every single name of every single teacher I had from K through 6. You can ask me later. Because I loved each of them so much. Our daughter went to public schools. She was actually in a very urban public school. She had a school that was over 90% free and reduced lunch for a number of years. She went to school predominantly in that school with Somali immigrants and with Hmong immigrant kids. And I think it has made her this incredible adult that she is. Those experiences in the public schools. But I also got to see the importance of our nutrition programs. I also got to see the challenges. I got to see what went on after school when some kids were trying to just get something out of the vending machines to bring home. I got to see what was going on in the lunchroom, and I got to see what our school personnel, the love that they showed every day when they were dealing not just with being a teacher, not just with working in the cafeteria or being a counselor. They were literally the guide for those kids. They were their heart and soul while they had them in that school. So my plan, based on this, you can see it comes from my head, but also from my heart. My plan is, first of all, in my first 100 days, I have 137 things that I found out you can do without Congress, a president can do herself, that are legal. But I will tell you this, in the first 100 seconds, I will fire Betsy DeVos. I will put in place a Secretary of Education who comes from a teaching background, who understands the challenges our teachers face, and I will get a whole bunch of stuff done in just those first 100 days, because I think it is so important that we make education a priority. Secondly, major issue for me, teacher pay, and pay for our public school employees. From 1996 to 2017, the average weekly wages of public school teachers adjusted for inflation, pretty good speech, huh? Actually declined. That is not good. On average, teachers receive about 11% less in compensation than their counterparts in other professions. And I want to thank the ISEA for leading the way. Two big ways I'm going to increase teacher pay. One is directly with federal money, and we can do this, and I have a way to pay for it. And the other is with something called Progress Partnerships, which will be matching funds with states to really put pressure on the states. Boy, do you need pressure on this state to put more money in. So I think you do it both ways, and you get a major investment to get the pay up where it should be. Secondly, infrastructure. That's going to be an important part for me. I was the first candidate in the race to come out with an infrastructure plan that includes school infrastructure. I think that's a very, very important part of what we need to do. The next thing is closing the opportunity gap. We have the same issue in Minnesota in a big way like you have in Iowa. The color of your skin shouldn't determine the quality of your education. And so much of that is going to mean recruiting teachers of color, right? There's been study after study that show that students of color do better when you have teachers of color that are in the schools. And I can't stress how important that is. Next, IDEA grants. IDEA grants for kids with disabilities. I think we all know what's going on there. Federal mandate in place, good idea, but then they left the money behind, as so much happens so often. I am committed to fully funding IDEA. Next thing, mental health, and I've really been struck by this issue in Iowa. I was in Wapello and had a meeting, just general meeting with people in the area, and this woman came to it. She was a little late. She said, you know, I'm a school counselor, and I just got off work, and it's a school of about 650 kids. And she said, just today, 4 kids came to me to talk to me about thoughts of suicide. 4 kids in a school of 650. And she said they were all immigrant kids. They were all kids whose parents worked at a plant who were afraid that the Trump administration was going to deport their parents and deport them, and that their lives would never be the same. That is a story of course, a mean-spirited policy that has not worked for our economy. Let's start with that, which I will change immediately. But that is also a story of the need for mental health services. Not everyone in this room is qualified to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Yet, so many of you are on the front line having to do that work. So that means to me, getting the money out there for counselors, getting the money out there. You only have 64 public mental health beds in the state of Iowa. That is outrageous. That's why in so many of your rural areas, you see people waiting to get the kind of help that they need. So I came out fast with this policy, addiction and mental health. Part of this is my dad, when I was growing up, struggled with alcoholism. By the time my husband and I got married, he had 3 DWIs. That back then, the judge said, okay, you got a choice, jail or treatment. And he chose treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace. It changed his life. His treatment, his faith, his family, his friends got him through that. And I'm happy to say at age 91, he is now still sober. And that would not have happened without that. So I think for both mental health and for addiction, we should have the money out there for treatment. Last thing that I would mention is making sure that our kids are ready for the jobs of tomorrow. There's innovative things going on in the Iowa schools now, right now. I said on the debate stage the other day, sometimes I think we're not thinking big enough when we talk about education. We need to look at our economy and what are the jobs that our kids can take now and in the future. If we need 1 million home health care workers, which we do, then we better make sure that they get paid well enough. If we need more nursing assistants, things like that, well, then we have to make sure that we're encouraging people to get those degrees. As I noted, we are not going to have a shortage of MBAs in our country. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers. So making sure that we're working with our economy in that way. Finally, I'll mention the need to make sure we have strong unions. I am a big supporter of standing up for collective bargaining rights for public sector employees. And I support passing a federal law, Senator Hirono's, my friend Maisie's, Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act. And as president, I will get it done. So, let us end with this. Right now, we know we don't just need to eke by a victory in the presidential race, because if we do that at 4 a.m., I can tell you that state that ekes us by will not be Iowa. And I want to win these congressional races here, and I want to win the U.S. Senate race here. Because if we want to get all these things done, we've got to send Mitch McConnell packing. And the way we do that The way we do that is with a candidate at the top of the ticket that brings people with her instead of shutting them out. You know my track record. I have won every race, every place, every time. I have won in suburban districts. I have won in the reddest rural districts. I've run with a huge, high voter turnout, biggest in the country, in our urban districts and in our state. And that is what we need to win nationally. So remember, this is an election for our kids. This is an election for our economy, but it is also something else, and you know this as educators. It is a decency check. It is a values check. It is a patriotism check. It is having a president where if you want to teach about the presidency and you want your kids to listen to a president's address, that you don't have to turn down the volume and mute it, okay? Because right now, so many parents don't know what that guy's going to say at his next rally. So I ask for your support. Thank you. My time had expired, and we know how subtle you are about this. When you're teachers, you know, you don't want to violate the rules. When the class is over, the bell rings, and it is over. Thank you, everyone.
So, Senator, you understand that everyone in this room knows that they have a responsibility to make sure that democracy endures in this country. And one of the things that we're doing this year is honoring the 19th Amendment and the hard work and activism and advocacy of women and how they fought to make sure that they had a voice in our country. So we just want to say thank you for coming to Iowa.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is so good. Oh, my. Thank you. It was worth all the snow to come here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Joining us next is Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren is a former educator, and in 2012, she became the first woman from Massachusetts to be elected to the U.S. Senate. I see a theme here. She was formerly a law school professor specializing in bankruptcy law. Because of her expertise and advocacy, in 2010, President Obama appointed her assistant to the president and special advisor to the Secretary of Treasury on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where she advocated for working Americans and the middle class. Please join me with an Iowa welcome, bringing Senator Elizabeth Warren to the stage. Thank you for coming. God love you.
Thank you. Hello, Iowa educators. Hello. It's good to see you this morning. Boy, that weather out there, it's a reminder, Iowa educators are tough, right? A hearty band. It is so good to see all of you this morning. Mike, thank you for the introduction. You know, I'm going to fill in just a little bit and just tell you a little bit more. I grew up in a family. My daddy had a lot of different jobs. He sold paint, he sold carpet, he sold fencing. He ended up as a janitor. My mom worked a minimum wage job at Sears. I have 3 older brothers who all went off and joined the military. Their chance to serve and also their ticket to America's middle class. I have known what I wanted to be since 2nd grade. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for our public school teachers one more time? When Mrs. Lee gathered me up in her arms about halfway through 2nd grade and whispered in my ear, "You know, Miss Betsy, you too could be a teacher," my whole life changed. And it is the reminder of what school teachers, educators do every single day. They reach that one child out there and change their lives forever. So Thank you to Mrs. Lee, and thank you to every public educator in America. You're changing our future. So here I am, of all the amazing, I could tell a long story about how I went from being a special education teacher, ultimately to a law professor, then to a senator, and now candidate for President of the United States. Yes, what an amazing story. But here's the thing. I think of the job of the President of the United States is to set the course for how we build a stronger future for this country. And it's got a lot of parts to it that we have to think about national defense, about climate change, how we think about our future. But for me, a huge and central part of this is we build a strong future when we invest in the education of every single one of our children. Every single one of them. So I think about the things that you could do as President of the United States. In fact, I love saying this. I think about the things that a president could do all by herself. Woohoo! And here's the first one. I make a promise, and that is the next Secretary of Education, my Secretary of Education, will be someone who has taught in public school. Betsy DeVos need not apply. But I do believe this is important. We need somebody at the Department of Education who believes in public education. And let me say a second part to that I think is important, and that is public school dollars should stay in public schools, period. We have no business sending this money off to for-profit charters. This is outrageous. The public should support public schools, and that means the money stays in our public schools, every bit of it. But you know, for me, a big part of this is to think about how we fund public schools. You got to look at where we're doing it right now. And one of the consequences of what we do right now, by relying so heavily on property taxes, is that we just perpetuate discrimination. So, poor neighborhoods end up with less money for their schools. Years of housing discrimination based on race has implications then for generations of children who can't get the same funding for their schools. I believe it is time in America to say the funding of our schools, the support of our schools, is no longer just an obligation of local government and state government. It is a national obligation, a national emergency. And I got a plan for that. So here's my plan. Here's my plan to fundamentally change how we think about funding public education, and as a consequence, to fundamentally change what we can do in public education. Mine starts with, it is time in America for a wealth tax. This is pretty straightforward. This is your first $50 million in assets, free and clear, right? But on your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents on every dollar after that. When you hit $1 billion in assets, you got to pitch in a few pennies more. That's all this is about. It's like a property tax, only it's national, and it's not just real estate. For this top 1/10 of 1%, it also includes their stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandt, and the yacht, right? That's the basic idea. So here's the part I want you to hear. What can we do with 2 cents? And the answer is we can invest in an entire generation. We can invest in the education of every single young person in this country. So here's where I start. An $800 billion investment of new federal dollars on top of the state dollars and local dollars in public K through 12 in America. Think what that would mean. It would let us quadruple the funding for Title I schools. I mean, put real money into our Title I schools. It would let us set aside $50 billion for upgrading all of our physical facilities. No more ceiling tiles that are falling down and leaky pipes and heat that doesn't work. All of our buildings should be first-rate buildings. And you know how a special education teacher approaches this. This would be full funding for the first time in history for IDEA, so every child with a disability gets the education they need. Think about that. We can do all of that for K-12 plus. I've done the math on this. You wouldn't be surprised. We can build an excellence fund that would let us give a grant to every single public school in America of $1 million for that public school to do what it needs to do to raise its excellence standards. Think about that. $800 billion, and the way it's set up is to encourage the states and localities to make additional investments in their public schools. We want to build a strong future. We need to do it by investing in public schools. In addition to that, that 2-cent wealth tax not only lets us do that for public schools, it also lets us provide universal early childhood education. Every baby in this country age 0 to 5. Daycare, the whole business. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. And we can stop exploiting the people who do this work. It lets us raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in America. 2 cents. We can do all of that for our babies. We can do all of that for K-12 plus. We can provide tuition-free technical school, 2-year college, 4-year public college for anybody who wants an education. We can also help level the playing field in another way at the college level. We can invest $50 billion in our historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions. These are places that disproportionately educate tomorrow's teachers, and we can give them a boost. We can do all of that on a 2-cent wealth tax, plus, and this is something that I know matters to a lot of teachers, we can cancel student loan debt for 43 million Americans. This is the centerpiece of what I want to see us do as a country. Like I said, there are differences I can make as president on who is the Secretary of Education, on where we spend the federal dollars that are already committed, but we can make a bigger change than that. We can make a statement as a nation about how we build a future. For me, this is about money. You bet it is. It's about budgets. I'm that kind of nerd, right? I watch this stuff. But this is about respect. And this is about reminding ourselves and our entire nation that the way we build a future is that we invest in every single one of our children. We invest in them with our dollars and with our hearts. It is an honor to fight alongside you in this battle. This is how we will build an America that works for everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Senator Warren, as you know, we have a room full of folks who fully believe in democracy, and I know deep in your heart you believe in democracy as well. And the Iowa State Education Association this year is celebrating the ratification of the 19th Amendment.
Yes. We're in favor of that.
And so we just want to say thank you for coming to Iowa, and keep up the good fight and continue to fight for women.
Good. And let's find a good way to celebrate the 19th Amendment.
Absolutely.
Come November 2020.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Just waiting for my signal. Isn't this great, folks? Isn't this wonderful? It's amazing. And are they talking about public education? They certainly are. Are they supporting our kids? They are. I think this is proving to be a very good day for us here in the state and for the Iowa State Education Association. I'm just waiting to see the signal for the vice president. And so I'll just give you a few minutes just to kind of talk to yourself until I see that we're ready to go. This might be a good time for you to go ahead and post some of those photos that you've been taking on Facebook. You might want to check Iowa DOT to see what the roads are like. I hear there are comments on the live stream, so you could be checking out that as well. I might even look at my own cell phone while I'm up here. Two minutes, I guess he's in the building, and it'll be 2 minutes before he walks through that door. You know, what else would be, this is an opportune time for you to do, is to go to educationvotes.org or Strong Public Schools and check out the comparisons between the speakers, the two that we've had and the two that are coming. Don't play the videos, but you can go to that site, click on the top where it says presidential or 2020 presidential, pull down the menu bar, click on either one of the options that you have there. But I have taken the time to explore that website, and it is very, very interesting. And I think the folks that they've interviewed have provided very good answers to our questions.